I never thought I'd be telling this story. At 56 years old, I believed I had seen the worst life could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. What happened 3 months ago changed everything I thought I knew about my family, about trust, and about the people we love most. My name is Patricia, and I've lived in the same house for 32 years. My husband Marcus and I bought this little 2-bedroom home when we were newlyweds, barely scraping together enough for the down payment. We painted every wall, fixed every leak, and turned it into our sanctuary. When Marcus passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack, this house became my lifeline, the only thing connecting me to our beautiful life together. I thought I was safe here. I thought family meant something. I was about to learn just how naive a woman my age could still be. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because I was sorting through Marcus's old photographs, something I did every Tuesday as part of my healing routine. The morning sun was streaming through our kitchen window, the same window where Marcus used to stand drinking his coffee and watching the birds. I had his favorite mug in my hands when I heard the front door slam open so hard it rattled the picture frames on the wall. Before I could even turn around, my daughter-in-law Jessica was standing in my kitchen doorway, her face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. But it was her eyes that scared me, cold, calculating, and filled with a hatred that made my blood freeze. "Where is it?" she screamed, her voice echoing through my quiet home like a gunshot. I dropped Marcus's mug. It shattered on the kitchen floor, ceramic pieces scattering everywhere like my suddenly shattered piece. "Jessica? What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "I have a key, remember? Michael gave it to me years ago." She held up a silver key, waving it in front of my face like evidence in a courtroom. "Now stop playing dumb and tell me where the deed is." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What deed? What are you talking about?" "The deed to this house." She moved closer, and I could smell alcohol on her breath even though it wasn't even noon. "I know you're hiding it somewhere. This house belongs to me now, Patricia. Me and Michael. Not you." I backed against the kitchen counter, my hands shaking. Jessica had always been difficult, demanding, entitled, quick to start arguments at family gatherings. But this was different. This was dangerous. "Jessica, you're scaring me. This is my house. Marcus left it to me in his will. You know that." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was the kind of laugh that sends chills down your spine. "Did he, though? Are you sure about that?" Before I could respond, she pushed past me and headed toward Marcus's old study. I followed her, my bare feet stepping carefully around the broken mug pieces, my mind racing to understand what was happening. "You can't just come into my house, Anne. It's not your house." She spun around, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "It never was your house. You've been living a lie for 2 years, Patricia. 2 years." She yanked open the desk drawers, throwing papers everywhere. Bank statements, old bills, Marcus's reading glasses, everything scattered across the hardwood floor like confetti from a nightmare celebration. "Stop it. Stop destroying my things." But Jessica wasn't listening. She was pulling files from the filing cabinet, muttering under her breath. "I know it's here somewhere. Michael said you'd try to hide it, but I know it's here." "Michael? What does Michael have to do with this?" My son had been dead for 8 months. Car accident on the interstate, or so I thought. Why was she talking about him like he was still alive? Jessica froze. For just a moment, her aggressive facade cracked, and I saw something else in her eyes, fear. Pure, undiluted fear. "I meant, before he died. Before the accident. He told me about the house. But I knew my daughter-in-law well enough to recognize when she was lying. She was lying now." "Jessica, sit down. Tell me what's really going on here." "I don't have time for this." She resumed her frantic search, now pulling books from the bookshelf. "I need that deed, Patricia. I need it today, or we're both going to be in serious trouble. We? What do you mean we? She stopped again, and this time when she looked at me, I saw desperation mixed with the anger. There are people looking for money, Patricia. A lot of money. Money that Michael owed, and now they're coming after everything he owned. Including this house. My legs felt weak. I sank into Marcus's old leather chair, the same chair where he used to read me passages from his favorite books every Sunday evening. What money? What are you talking about? Jessica's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went white. They're coming here tonight. If I don't have the deed transferred into my name by then, they're going to take everything. And I mean everything, Patricia. Who's coming? Jessica, you're not making sense. She ignored my question and continued tearing through the study. Papers were flying everywhere, and I watched 30 years of carefully organized documents being destroyed in minutes. Then she found what she was looking for. From the bottom drawer of Marcus's filing cabinet, she pulled out a manila envelope I'd never seen before. Her hands were shaking as she opened it, and when she saw what was inside, she actually smiled for the first time since she'd burst into my house. Got it, she whispered. What is that? She held up a document, official-looking papers with legal seals and signatures. This, Patricia, is the real deed to this house. The one that shows Michael as the primary owner, not you. The room started spinning. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. That's impossible. Marcus left me this house. I have the will. I have my own copy of the deed. Do you, though? Jessica's smile was cruel now. Are you sure those documents you have are real? She pulled out her phone and made a call. It's me. I found it. The real deed. Yes, Michael's name is on it just like he said it would be. She paused, listening. Okay. I'll bring it to you within the hour. Jessica, please. Just tell me what's happening. If Michael owed money, we can figure this out together. We're family. She hung up the phone and looked at me with something that might have been pity. Patricia, you have no idea what kind of man your son really was. And you have no idea what he's put me through. What he's put you through? Jessica, he's dead. He died 8 months ago. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire. Jessica stared at me for what felt like an eternity, and I watched her internal struggle play out across her face. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was barely above a whisper. No, Patricia. He didn't. The world stopped. Everything, my heartbeat, my breathing, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, everything stopped. What did you say? Michael didn't die in that car accident. He's alive, Patricia. He's alive, and he's been hiding from the people he owes money to. Hiding and waiting for me to get this house so we can sell it and disappear forever. I couldn't process what she was saying. It was like she was speaking a foreign language. That's impossible. I identified his body. I buried my son. I stood at his grave and threw dirt on his coffin. Jessica shook her head slowly. You identified someone else's body. Someone Michael paid to stage the whole thing. The car accident, the body, even the dental records, all fake. The chair wasn't enough to support me anymore. I slid down onto the floor, my back against Marcus's desk, staring up at this woman who was systematically destroying my entire reality. You're lying. You have to be lying. She pulled out her phone again and showed me a text message. The sender's name made my heart stop, Michael. The message was from 3 hours ago. Did you get the deed yet? They found our hotel. We need to move tonight. I stared at the phone screen until the words blurred together through my tears. My son, my baby boy who I had mourned for 8 months, who I had cried over every single night, was alive. And he had let me believe he was dead. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why would he do this to me? Jessica slumped against the wall, suddenly looking as exhausted as I felt. Because he's in deep with some very dangerous people, Patricia. Gambling debts, loan sharks, people who don't just break your legs when you can't pay, they kill your whole family. How much money are we talking about? $250,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I had maybe $30,000 in my savings account, and this house was worth perhaps $120,000 on a good day. Even if he sells this house, that's not enough. It's a start. And once we disappear with new identities, the trail goes cold. Michael has it all figured out. New identities? I looked up at her from the floor. Jessica, listen to yourself. You're talking about completely disappearing, leaving everything behind. What about your life? Your job? Your friends? She laughed bitterly. What life? What friends? Do you think I chose this, Patricia? Do you think I wanted to fake my husband's death and terrorize his mother? I'm trapped in this nightmare just like you are. For the first time since she'd burst into my house, I saw Jessica as something other than a threat. I saw her as another victim. How long have you known he was alive? Since the day after the funeral. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. He called me from a payphone and told me the plan. Said I had to play the grieving widow while he set up our new life. 8 months. You've known for 8 months and you let me grieve. I wanted to tell you so many times. You have no idea how hard it was, watching you cry at family gatherings, seeing you wear black to church every Sunday. But Michael said if I told anyone, even you, it would ruin everything. I struggled to my feet, using the desk for support. Everything I thought I knew about my family was crashing down around me like a house of cards in a windstorm. Where is he now? Jessica hesitated. I can't tell you that. Jessica, he's my son. Whatever he's done, whatever trouble he's in, I have a right to know where my child is. He's not your child anymore, Patricia. He's a stranger who's willing to let his mother lose everything to save his own skin. The truth in her words cut deeper than any knife could have. This wasn't the Michael I had raised, the little boy who used to bring me flowers from the neighbor's garden and apologize for tracking mud through the house. This was someone else entirely. I need to see him. Patricia, no. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. My son faked his own death, let me bury a stranger, and now he wants to steal my house to pay off gambling debts. I think I deserve an explanation, don't you? Jessica looked at her phone again. Another text from Michael, where are you? We need to leave in 2 hours. He's going to be so angry that I told you. Good. Let him be angry. I've been angry for 8 months, grieving a son who wasn't even dead. Jessica stared at the deed in her hands, then at me, then back at the deed. I could see her wrestling with a decision that would change both our lives forever. There's something else you need to know, Patricia. Something about why he really faked his death. What now? It wasn't just the gambling debts. Michael, he did something else. Something that would have sent him to prison for a very long time. The hits just kept coming. I braced myself against the desk, wondering what other revelations could possibly be waiting for me. What did he do? He was stealing money from his company. For years. Almost $500,000 over 3 years, all to feed his gambling addiction. I closed my eyes and tried to picture my son, the Michael I thought I knew. The Michael who had graduated college with honors, who had married Jessica in a beautiful ceremony, who had called me every Sunday just to check in. That Michael was apparently a complete fiction. So the gambling debts aren't the only problem. No. The company figured out what he was doing right before the fake accident. If they find out he's alive, he goes to prison for 20 years minimum. And you're helping him. Jessica's face crumpled. I'm his wife, Patricia. Or I was. I don't even know anymore. He told me if I didn't help him, he'd make sure I went down for the embezzlement too. He had forged documents with my signature on them, fake evidence that made it look like I was involved. So you're both trapped. I'm trapped. He's the spider, and I'm just another fly in his web. Just like you. I looked around Marcus's destroyed study, papers scattered everywhere, drawers hanging open, 30 years of memories turned into chaos in less than an hour. This had been Marcus's sanctuary, the place where he paid bills and balanced our checkbook and wrote letters to his sister in Georgia. Now it looked like a crime scene. Jessica, I need you to take me to him. I can't do that. Yes, you can. Because right now, you have two choices. You can take me to see my son, or I can call the police and tell them everything you just told me. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. Try me. I'm 56 years old, Jessica. I've lost my husband, I thought I lost my son, and now I'm about to lose my home. I have absolutely nothing left to lose. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her options. Finally, she nodded. Okay. But Patricia, when you see what he's become, it's going to break your heart all over again. My heart's already broken. It's been broken for 8 months. Jessica picked up the deed and folded it carefully. He's staying at a motel about 40 minutes from here. But we have to hurry. If we're not back with this deed in 2 hours, the people he owes money to are going to come looking for it. I grabbed my purse and car keys from the kitchen counter, stepping carefully around the pieces of Marcus's broken mug. As we walked toward the front door, I took one last look around my home, the home I might be seeing for the last time. Patricia. I turned to look at Jessica. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely vulnerable. I'm sorry. For all of this. I never wanted it to go this far. I know, I said. And surprisingly, I meant it. As we drove through town toward the highway, I tried to prepare myself for seeing my son alive. 8 months ago, I had been planning his funeral, choosing flowers and writing his obituary. Now I was driving to confront him about faking his own death. How do you prepare for something like that? The motel Jessica directed me to was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Peeling paint, broken neon signs, and parking lots full of cars that had seen better decades. We pulled into a spot in front of room 237, and Jessica turned off the engine. He's in there, she said, pointing to a door with faded numbers hanging at odd angles. Is he alone? As far as I know. I stared at that door, knowing that everything would change the moment I walked through it. For 8 months, I had been mourning my son. In a few minutes, I would have to confront the reality that he had chosen to let me suffer rather than face his problems honestly. Jessica, before we go in there, I need to ask you something. Okay. Do you love him? After everything he's put you through, do you still love my son? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I love the man I married. But that man doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. I understood exactly what she meant. I had been grieving for a son who was apparently as fictional as the man Jessica had fallen in love with. Are you ready? I took a deep breath and nodded. Let's go see Michael. Jessica knocked on the motel room door in a specific pattern, 3 quick knocks, then 2 slow ones. I heard movement inside, then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened, and I saw my son for the first time in 8 months. He looked terrible. Michael had always been a handsome man, tall like his father, with the same warm brown eyes and easy smile that had charmed teachers and girlfriends and eventually Jessica. The man standing in the doorway looked like a stranger wearing my son's face. He was thinner than I remembered, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. His hair was longer and unkempt, and he had grown a beard that made him look older and harder. But it was his eyes that shocked me most. They were cold and calculating, nothing like the warm, laughing eyes I remembered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other across the threshold of that dingy motel room, 8 months of grief and lies and betrayal hanging in the air between us. Hello, Michael. Mom. His voice was different too, flatter, more guarded. Jessica told you. Yes, she did. He stepped aside to let us into the room, and I got my first look at how my son had been living. The room was sparse and dirty, with 2 beds covered in rumpled sheets and clothes scattered across every surface. Fast food containers and empty beer bottles covered the small table by the window, and the air smelled like cigarettes and desperation. "So now you know," he said, closing the door behind us and turning all the locks. "Now I know that my son is alive. What I don't know is why he let his mother believe he was dead for 8 months." Michael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was trying to think of an excuse for something he'd done wrong. "It was the only way, Mom. If you knew I was alive, you might have said something to someone. One slip, one wrong word, and I'd be dead for real. So instead you let me grieve. You let me plan your funeral and bury a stranger and cry myself to sleep every night for 8 months. I'm sorry about that, I really am. But I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Michael. You chose to gamble away money that wasn't yours. You chose to steal from your company. You chose to fake your death rather than face the consequences of your actions." His face hardened. "Don't lecture me about choices, Mom. You have no idea what kind of people I was dealing with. They would have killed me, and probably you and Jessica too, just to make a point. So you decided to steal my house instead. I'm not stealing it. I'm using it to save our lives." I looked around the motel room, taking in the evidence of how far my son had fallen. "This is saving your life? Living like a fugitive in places like this? It's temporary. Once we get the money and disappear, we can start over somewhere new. With new identities. New names. Completely cutting off everyone who ever loved you. Sometimes that's what it takes to survive, Mom." The casual way he said it, like abandoning his family was just another business decision, broke something inside me that I didn't know could be broken twice. "Do you hear yourself, Michael? Do you understand what you're saying?" He sat down on one of the beds and put his head in his hands. "I know how it sounds. But you don't understand the pressure I was under. The debts kept getting bigger, and I kept thinking I could win it back. Just one more bet, one more game, and everything would be okay. So you stole from your company. I borrowed from my company. I was going to pay it back. With what money? With my winnings." I stared at my son, this stranger wearing my son's face, and realized that he genuinely believed his own lies. He had convinced himself that stealing was borrowing, that gambling was investing, that destroying his family was saving them. "Michael, do you remember when you were 12 and you stole $20 from my purse to buy comic books?" He looked up at me, confused by the change in subject. "Yeah, I guess. Do you remember what your father said when we caught you?" "Not really. He said that stealing was just another word for lying with actions instead of words. He said that when you steal from someone, you're telling them that what you want is more important than their trust." Michael was quiet for a moment. "This is different, Mom." "How? How is this different?" "Because this time the stakes are life and death. The stakes have always been life and death, Michael. Maybe not physical death, but the death of relationships, the death of trust, the death of family. You killed your family 8 months ago when you chose to fake your death rather than tell us the truth." Jessica, who had been sitting silently in the room's only chair, finally spoke up. "Patricia's right, Michael. This has gone too far. Don't you start," he snapped at her. "We've come this far. We're not backing out now. What if we didn't run?" I asked. "What if we faced this together, as a family?" Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Face what together? The loan sharks who want to break my legs? The federal prosecutors who want to send me to prison? The company that wants to sue me for everything I've ever owned? Yes. All of it. Together. Mom, you're talking about losing everything. Your house, your savings, your reputation. Is that really what you want?" I looked around the motel room again, then at my son's hollow eyes, then at Jessica's defeated expression. "Michael, I've already lost everything that matters. I lost my husband 2 years ago. I lost my son 8 months ago, or so I thought. And now I'm finding out that the son I raised, the man I thought you were, never really existed at all. That's not true. Isn't it? The Michael I knew would never have let his mother suffer like this. The Michael I raised would have come to me when he was in trouble, not stolen from me to solve his problems. Michael stood up and started pacing the small room like a caged animal. You don't understand the kind of pressure I was under. The phone calls, the threats, the constant fear that they were going to hurt Jessica to get to me. So you thought the solution was to hurt me instead? I thought the solution was to disappear before anyone else got hurt. By stealing my house. By using your house to save our lives. It's the same thing, Michael, and you know it. He stopped pacing and looked at me with those cold, strange eyes. Fine. Yes, I'm stealing your house. But would you rather have a dead son or a homeless mother? The casual cruelty of the question took my breath away. I'd rather have a son who told me the truth and let me help him figure out a solution that didn't involve destroying everything our family built together. There is no other solution. I've looked at this from every angle. This is the only way. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot full of broken-down cars and broken-down dreams. In the distance, I could see the highway where normal people were driving to normal jobs and normal lives. Jessica, show me the deed. She looked nervously at Michael, who nodded. Jessica pulled out the folded papers and handed them to me. I studied the document carefully. It looked official, legal seals, notarized signatures, all the right stamps and dates. But something about it felt wrong. When was this deed created? What do you mean? Michael asked. I mean, when was this document actually made? This says it was filed 3 years ago, but I've never seen it before. Jessica and Michael exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. You forged this, didn't you? Mom, it's complicated. No, Michael, it's not complicated at all. You created a fake deed to steal my house, just like you created fake documents to frame Jessica for your embezzlement. How many other lies are there? How many other forgeries? Michael sat back down on the bed and put his head in his hands again. I don't know anymore. I've been lying for so long, I can't remember what's real and what's not. For the first time since I'd seen him alive, I heard something in my son's voice that sounded like the boy I remembered: vulnerability, confusion, fear. Michael, look at me. He raised his head, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy in his eyes. I know you're scared. I know you feel trapped. But this isn't the way out. This isn't who you're supposed to be. Who am I supposed to be, Mom? Because I honestly don't know anymore. I sat down on the bed next to him, the same way I used to when he was sick or had nightmares or just needed his mother. You're supposed to be Marcus's son. You're supposed to be the man your father would be proud of. Michael's eyes filled with tears, the first real emotion I'd seen from him since I'd walked into this room. Dad would hate what I've become. Yes, he would. But he'd also fight to help you become better. Just like I'm willing to do. It's too late for that, Mom. I've made too many mistakes. It's never too late to start telling the truth. It's never too late to stop running and face what you've done. Jessica was crying now too. Michael, maybe she's right. Maybe there's another way. There is no other way. Michael stood up again, anger replacing vulnerability. Don't you understand? These people don't negotiate. They don't forgive debts. They kill people who can't pay, and they kill their families too. Then we go to the police, I said. And tell them what? That I faked my own death to avoid gambling debts and embezzlement charges? They'll arrest me on the spot. Maybe. But I'd rather be crazy and honest than sane and living a lie. They could kill all of us right now. Yes, they could. But Michael, look at us. Really look at what we've become. You're living in a dirty motel room, terrified of every shadow. Jessica is having panic attacks and can't sleep at night. I've been mourning a son who wasn't even dead. This isn't living, it's just a slower way of dying. The man finished his phone call and returned to where we were sitting. Our employer is willing to consider your proposal, with conditions. What conditions? Your son turns himself in within 24 hours. He fully cooperates with federal investigators. He helps them recover every penny of the money he stole. And the family provides collateral for the remaining debt. What kind of collateral? The house. If the recovered money doesn't cover the full amount owed, the house gets sold and the proceeds go toward the debt. I felt my heart sink. Losing my house, the home Marcus and I had built together, the only thing I had left of our life, seemed almost as devastating as losing Michael. And if we agree to these conditions? Your son lives. He goes to prison, but he lives. And when he gets out, if there's still money owed, we can discuss a reasonable payment plan. Michael grabbed my hand. Mom, you can't agree to this. That house is all you have. I squeezed his hand and was surprised to find it was shaking. Michael, that house stopped being a home the day I thought I buried you. It's just a building now. But you're still my son. And sons are worth more than buildings. Jessica spoke up from her chair. What about me? What happens to me in all this? The taller man looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. If your husband cooperates fully, and if the forged documents he created to implicate you are turned over to authorities, you should be clear of any charges. You've been a victim in this too. Should be? Nothing's guaranteed, ma'am. But you have a much better chance of walking away from this than he does. I looked around the room one more time, at my son who was finally showing real emotion, at my daughter-in-law who had been trapped in this nightmare for months, at these two men who held our futures in their hands. I need a moment to discuss this with my family. You have 5 minutes, the shorter man said. Then both men stepped outside to give us privacy. As soon as the door closed, Michael exploded. Are you insane? You want me to go to prison for 20 years? I want you to take responsibility for what you've done. By throwing my life away? Your life is already thrown away, Michael. Look at yourself. Look at where you are. This isn't a life, it's just existing in fear. Jessica joined us on the bed. Michael, maybe your mother is right. Maybe this is our chance to finally stop running. Our chance? Jessica, you're not the one going to prison. No, but I'm the one who's been living in hell for 8 months, afraid to sleep, afraid to answer the phone, afraid to go home because I don't know if these people are waiting for me. I can't do this anymore, Michael. I won't do this anymore. Michael buried his face in his hands. 20 years, Mom. I'll be almost 60 when I get out. You'll be in your 70s. Jessica will have moved on, found someone else. I'll have nothing left to come home to. The pain in his voice broke my heart, but I couldn't let it change my mind. Michael, listen to me. Your father spent 30 years building a life based on honesty and hard work. When he died, people came from all over to tell me stories about how he had helped them, how he had been a man of his word, how they respected him. Do you know what people are going to say about you if you keep running? I don't care what people say. Yes, you do. Deep down, you care very much. Because you're Marcus Washington's son, and that still means something. It doesn't mean anything if I'm in prison. It means everything, especially if you're in prison. Because it means you finally chose to do the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing. There was another knock on the door, our 5 minutes were up. Michael, I said urgently, I need you to make a choice. Right now. Be the coward who keeps running until he dies, or be the man who faces what he's done and starts making amends. And you'll really give up the house? I thought about my kitchen, where Marcus used to make breakfast every Sunday morning. I thought about our bedroom, where we had dreamed together for 30 years. I thought about the garden where he had taught me to grow tomatoes, and the front porch where we used to sit and wave at neighbors. Then I looked at my son, my living, breathing son who needed his mother to save him from himself. Yes. I'll give up the house. Even though you'll have nowhere to go. I'll figure it out. I'm 56, not 96. I can start over. Michael was crying now, real tears, not the manipulative tears I'd seen earlier, but genuine grief and remorse. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for everything I've put you through. You didn't deserve any of this. I pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in 8 months, I was holding my son again. Not the stranger who had been living in this motel room, but Michael, scared and broken, but still my boy. I know you're sorry. And I forgive you. But now you have to forgive yourself enough to do the right thing. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Michael pulled back and looked at me with red eyes. Okay. Okay, I'll do it. I'll turn myself in. You're sure? No, I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of what I'll become if I keep running. I opened the door and let the 2 men back in. We accept your terms, I told them. The taller man nodded. Your son has 24 hours to surrender to federal authorities. We'll be monitoring the situation to make sure he follows through. He will. For all our sakes, I hope you're right, Mrs. Washington. After they left, the 3 of us sat in that motel room planning the end of Michael's life as a free man. We called a federal prosecutor Jessica found through her company's legal department. We scheduled a surrender meeting for the following morning. We discussed which lawyers might be able to help with his case. It was the most honest conversation our family had had in years. That night, I didn't go back to my house. Instead, I stayed in the motel room with Michael and Jessica, talking until sunrise about memories and mistakes and hopes for a future that looked very different from anything we had planned. Michael told me about his first bet, $20 on a college basketball game when he was 19. He told me how the wins felt like validation and the losses felt like challenges to bet bigger next time. He told me about the night he first stole money from his company, convincing himself he was just borrowing it temporarily. Jessica told me about the phone call that changed everything, Michael calling the day after his fake funeral to tell her he was alive. She told me about the months of lies she'd had to tell, the nightmares she'd been having, the way she'd started drinking just to get through each day. And I told them about the 8 months I'd spent grieving, about the conversations I'd had with Marcus's grave about our son's death, about how I'd been planning to sell the house and move closer to my sister because staying there without family felt impossible. As the sun came up over that dingy motel parking lot, something had shifted between us. We were still facing an enormous crisis. Michael was still going to prison. I was still going to lose my house. Jessica was still going to have to rebuild her entire life. But we were facing it together, as a family, with honesty for the first time in years. At 9 o'clock that morning, Michael Washington walked into the federal building downtown and surrendered to authorities. Jessica and I were with him, along with the lawyer we'd hired with money from my savings account. The prosecutor was a stern woman in her 40s who had clearly seen cases like Michael's before. She listened to his confession, reviewed the evidence he provided, and outlined the charges he would be facing. Embezzlement. Tax evasion. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. The list was longer than I had expected, and each charge carried significant prison time. But the prosecutor also explained that Michael's cooperation would be taken into account during sentencing. If he helped them recover the stolen money and testified against anyone else involved in financial crimes at his company, he could potentially reduce his sentence by several years. How many years are we talking about? I asked. With cooperation and showing of genuine remorse, probably 12 to 15 years instead of 20 to 25. 12 years. Michael would be 47 when he got out. Still young enough to have a life, a career, maybe even a family if Jessica waited for him. But Jessica had already made it clear she wouldn't be waiting. That afternoon, while Michael was being processed into the federal detention center, she filed for divorce. I can't do it, Patricia, she told me over coffee at a diner near the courthouse. I love him, or I love who he used to be, but I can't spend the next 12 years of my life waiting for a man who might not even exist anymore when he gets out. I understood. Jessica was young, only 32. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she deserved a chance to build something healthy and honest with someone who wouldn't put her through what Michael had. What will you do now? Go back to my maiden name. Move to another city, maybe. Start over completely. I'd like to stay in touch, if that's okay with you. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. I'd like that too. You're the only good thing that came out of my marriage to your son. 3 weeks later, federal agents seized all of Michael's assets, including the forged deed to my house. The real deed was found in his safety deposit box, along with almost $40,000 in cash and several other forged documents. It turned out Michael had been planning this scheme for over a year, creating fake documents and setting up the fake death scenario while continuing to steal from his company. The level of premeditation was staggering. But it also meant the government was able to recover more money than anyone had expected, almost $400,000 in total. Enough to pay off his debt to the loan sharks and leave a small amount left over. That small amount, about $15,000, was given to me as partial compensation for what the family had endured. It wasn't much, but it was enough to help me start over. I sold the house voluntarily rather than wait for it to be seized. A nice young couple bought it, a teacher and a nurse who reminded me of Marcus and myself 30 years ago. I stayed long enough to see them move in, to see children's bicycles in the driveway and flowers planted in the garden where Marcus used to grow tomatoes. It hurt to leave, but it also felt right somehow. That house had been built on love and honesty. It deserved a family that could honor those values. With the money from the house sale and my savings, I was able to buy a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen with a window that faced east so I could still watch the sunrise. It was in this apartment, 6 months after Michael went to prison, that I started writing letters. The first letter was to Michael. I wrote to him every week, telling him about my new life, about the neighbors I was meeting, about the part-time job I'd found at the library. I told him about the books I was reading and the shows I was watching and the way the light came through my kitchen window in the mornings. But I also wrote to him about the things that mattered more. I wrote about forgiveness and redemption and the long road back to becoming the person he was supposed to be. I wrote about his father and the values Marcus had tried to teach him. I wrote about hope. Michael wrote back, sporadically at first, then more regularly. His letters were different from the man I had confronted in that motel room. They were honest and humble and full of genuine remorse for what he had put our family through. He told me about the other inmates he'd met, many of whom had similar stories of addiction and poor choices and lives that had spiraled out of control. He told me about the counseling programs he'd enrolled in, the education classes he was taking, the job skills he was learning. Most importantly, he told me about the work he was doing to understand why he had made the choices he'd made, and how he planned to make different choices when he was released. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, he wrote in one letter. I can't give you back the 8 months you spent grieving for me, or the house you lost, or the trust one shattered. But I can promise you that I'm using this time to become worthy of a second chance. The second set of letters I wrote were to Jessica. She had moved to Portland and was working for a nonprofit organization that helped women escape domestic violence. She seemed to be building a good life for herself, and I was proud of her strength in walking away from a toxic situation. I don't hate Michael, she wrote to me. I feel sorry for him. But I also feel grateful that I got out before I became so invested in his lies that I couldn't see the truth anymore. She was dating someone new, a social worker named David who shared her passion for helping people. From her letters, he sounded like a good man who appreciated her strength and honesty. The third set of letters were the hardest to write. These were letters to Marcus. I know it sounds strange, writing letters to someone who's been dead for over 2 years. But I found that putting my thoughts and feelings down on paper helped me process everything that had happened. I wrote to Marcus about my anger at Michael for what he'd put us through. I wrote about my guilt for not seeing the signs of his addiction and financial problems earlier. I wrote about my fear that I had failed as a mother. But I also wrote about my hope for Michael's future, about my pride in Jessica's courage, and about my slowly growing sense that our family might actually survive this crisis. I think you would be proud of the choice I made in that motel room, I wrote in one letter. I chose truth over comfort, accountability over easy answers. It cost us everything we built together, but it might have saved our son's life. 1 year after Michael went to prison, I got a letter that changed everything. It wasn't from Michael or Jessica or anyone else I expected. It was from David Chin, the prosecutor who had handled Michael's case. Mrs. Washington, the letter began, I wanted to let you know that your son's cooperation in our investigation has been exemplary. Because of information he provided, we were able to uncover a much larger financial fraud scheme at his former company, involving several executives and potentially millions of dollars in stolen funds. The letter went on to explain that Michael's assistance had been so valuable that the prosecutor was recommending a significant reduction in his sentence. Instead of 12 to 15 years, your son will likely serve 8 to 10 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. 8 years. Michael could be out when he was 43. Still young enough to rebuild his life completely. But the letter contained an even bigger surprise. Additionally, because the fraud scheme your son helped us uncover involved the theft of employee pension funds, there will be a reward for his assistance. That reward, minus taxes and fees, comes to approximately $50,000. Your son has requested that this money be given to you, as partial compensation for the losses your family suffered. $50,000 wouldn't replace everything we'd lost, but it would give me security for the first time since this whole nightmare began. It would let me stop worrying about money and focus on rebuilding our family relationships. I visited Michael for the first time since he'd been sentenced. The federal prison was a 3-hour drive from my apartment, but I made the trip on a sunny Saturday in October, almost exactly 2 years after this whole ordeal had begun. He looked different again. Healthier this time, he'd gained weight and muscle, his skin had color again, and his eyes had lost that desperate, hunted look I'd seen in the motel room. But more than his physical appearance, something fundamental had changed about Michael. He seemed calmer, more centered, more like the son I remembered from before gambling had taken over his life. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. We sat across from each other at a small table in the prison visiting room, surrounded by other families having similar conversations. For a few minutes, we just looked at each other, both of us probably thinking about how far we'd traveled from that terrible day in the motel. I got the letter about your sentence reduction. 8 years is much better than 15. I know. I'm grateful for the chance to get out sooner. What will you do when you're released? Michael thought about the question carefully. I want to work with addiction counselors, help other people who are struggling with gambling problems. I know it sounds like I'm just saying what you want to hear, but I really think I could make a difference. Why that kind of work? Because I understand the mindset. I know what it's like to convince yourself that the next bet will fix everything, that you're just temporarily borrowing money, that you're not really hurting anyone. I know how those lies work because I lived them for years. I studied my son's face, looking for signs that he was manipulating me again, trying to tell me what he thought I wanted to hear. But what I saw was genuine conviction and, for the first time in years, hope. Michael, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you remember who you used to be, before the gambling? Do you remember the man you were when you called me every Sunday and helped your father fix the roof? His eyes filled with tears. I remember him. And I miss him. I've spent the last year trying to figure out how to become him again, or at least become someone he would respect. And do you think you can do that? I think I have to try. Not just for you or for Jessica or for anyone else, but for myself. Because the alternative is becoming the man I was in that motel room permanently, and I can't live with that. We talked for 2 hours about his plans for the future, about the counseling programs he'd completed, about the books he'd been reading and the skills he'd been learning. It was the kind of conversation we used to have when he was younger, honest, thoughtful, full of genuine connection. As I was preparing to leave, Michael reached across the table and took my hands. Mom, I need to tell you something. What is it? I know I can never fully make up for what I put you through. I know that saying, I'm sorry, doesn't give you back your house or the 8 months you spent grieving for me or the trust one destroyed. But I want you to know that I think about it every day. Every single day, I think about the choice you made in that motel room to save my life, even though it cost you everything. I squeezed his hands. Michael, you didn't cost me everything. You cost me a house and some money and a lot of peace of mind. But you didn't cost me what matters most. What's that? My son. I thought I'd lost you 8 months before I ever walked into that motel room. But I found you again, and that's worth more than any house. The drive home from the prison gave me 3 hours to think about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. I thought about the woman I'd been before any of this started, comfortable in my routine, secure in my assumptions about my family, confident that I understood my life. That woman was gone, and I found that I didn't miss her as much as I thought I would. The woman I was now had learned things about herself she never could have imagined. I had learned that I was strong enough to lose everything and start over. I had learned that I was brave enough to confront dangerous people when my son's life was at stake. I had learned that I could make the hardest choice imaginable, letting my child face the consequences of his actions, because it was the right thing to do. I had also learned that family wasn't just about blood relationships or shared history. Jessica had become more of a daughter to me than a daughter-in-law, and I was proud of the way she had rebuilt her life. The young couple who bought my house had started sending me pictures of the improvements they were making, and I felt like I was watching new family members take care of something precious. Most importantly, I had learned that it's possible to love someone completely while still holding them accountable for their choices. For too many years, I had confused enabling with loving, supporting with rescuing. Michael's crisis had taught me the difference. 6 months after my prison visit, I got another letter that surprised me. This one was from Jessica, and it contained an invitation to her wedding. I know this might be awkward, she wrote, since technically I'm still married to Michael until our divorce is finalized. But you've been more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was, and I can't imagine getting married without you there. The wedding was beautiful, small and simple, held in a park in Portland with about 30 guests. Jessica looked radiant in a simple white dress, and David looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. During the reception, Jessica pulled me aside. Patricia, I need to ask you something. Of course. Do you think I'm a terrible person for not waiting for Michael? For moving on while he's in prison? I looked at this young woman who had survived being manipulated and threatened and trapped in a nightmare not of her making, who had found the strength to leave and rebuild and love again. Jessica, I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. And I think Michael would want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include him. Will you tell him about the wedding? Only if you want me to. I do. I want him to know that I'm okay, that I found someone good, that the story doesn't have to end with everyone being destroyed. I did tell Michael about Jessica's wedding in my next letter. His response surprised me. I'm happy for her, he wrote. I know that probably sounds strange, but I really am. Jessica deserves to be with someone who won't put her through what I did. David sounds like a good man, and I'm grateful that she found him. The letter continued, I've been thinking a lot about what love really means. I used to think it meant never letting go, fighting for someone no matter what. But I think real love sometimes means letting someone go so they can be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you. It was the most mature thing I'd ever heard my son say. 3 years into Michael's sentence, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to go back to school. At 59 years old, I enrolled in a counseling program at the local community college. If Michael was going to dedicate his life to helping people with addiction problems, I wanted to understand that world better. But more than that, I had discovered that our family's crisis had taught me skills I never knew I had. I was good at listening to people in pain. I was good at helping them see past their immediate fears to focus on long-term solutions. I was good at holding people accountable while still showing them compassion. Maybe it was time to use those skills to help other families facing similar crises. The program was challenging. I hadn't been in a classroom in almost 40 years. But I loved it. I loved learning about psychology and addiction and family systems. I loved my practicum work at a local treatment center. Most of all, I loved feeling like I was building something positive from the wreckage of our family's disaster. My classmates were mostly people half my age, but they welcomed me and seemed to appreciate the perspective that came with my life experience. Several of them told me that my story, about holding my son accountable while still loving him, had changed how they thought about their own family relationships. "You saved your son's life," one young woman told me after I shared our story in class. "Not by protecting him from consequences, but by making sure he faced them." That's real love. During my second year in the program, I started facilitating support groups for families of people with gambling addictions. It was heartbreaking work, sitting with parents and spouses and children who were watching their loved ones destroy their lives, but it was also deeply meaningful. Many of the families I worked with were facing the same choice I'd faced in that motel room: enable the addiction or force accountability. Some chose enabling, and I watched them lose everything while their addicted family member continued to spiral downward. Others chose accountability, and while it was painful, most of them eventually saw their loved ones begin to recover. The hardest thing about loving an addict, I would tell the support groups, is accepting that you can't love them into recovery. You can only love them enough to stop enabling their destruction. Michael wrote to me about my new career with pride and encouragement. "Mom, I can't think of anything that would make Dad prouder than knowing you're using what happened to our family to help other families avoid the same pain. You're turning our worst experience into something beautiful." 5 years into Michael's sentence, I graduated with my degree in addiction counseling. At 61 years old, I walked across that stage in cap and gown, with Jessica cheering from the audience. She had driven up from Portland with her husband and their 6-month-old daughter, my honorary granddaughter, Emma. After the ceremony, Jessica handed me a letter. "This came for you yesterday," she said. "I thought you might want to open it after graduation." The letter was from Michael, but it was different from his usual weekly letters. This one was thick, several pages long, and the envelope was marked "Special Delivery." I opened it right there in the college parking lot, with Jessica and David and baby Emma watching. "Dear Mom," it began. "By the time you read this, you'll have graduated from college and officially begun your new career as a counselor. I wanted this letter to reach you on that day because I have something important to tell you. 6 months ago, I was interviewed by the parole board for early release. Because of my cooperation with federal prosecutors and my completion of multiple rehabilitation programs, I've been approved for release in 18 months instead of serving my full sentence. I'll be getting out just after my 40th birthday, which means I'll still have time to build a real life and career and maybe even a family someday. But more importantly, I wanted you to know that the parole board specifically mentioned your influence on my rehabilitation. They said that the letters from you, and the way you've held me accountable while still showing love and support, demonstrated that I had a strong family foundation to return to. Mom, you didn't just save my life in that motel room. You've been saving my life every week for the past 5 years, one letter at a time. I know I can never repay you for what you've given me, not just the sacrifice of your house and your comfortable life, but the gift of seeing what real love looks like. Real love doesn't enable or excuse or look the other way. Real love demands that we become the best versions of ourselves, even when that's the hardest thing in the world to do. I'm going to be released into a halfway house about 2 hours from where you live. If you're willing, I'd like to see you. Not because I expect anything from you, not because I think things can go back to the way they were, but because I want to show you who I've become and ask for your help in figuring out how to use my second chance to make a difference in the world. Thank you for being my mother. Thank you for saving me from myself. And thank you for showing me that it's never too late to become the person you're supposed to be. All my love, Michael. P.S. I've been working on something while I've been here. I'm writing a book about gambling addiction and family recovery. I'm hoping it might help other families facing what we went through. Would you be willing to help me with it? I think your perspective as the mother who had to make the hardest choice would be valuable. I stood in that parking lot, holding my son's letter and my college diploma, surrounded by the new family I'd built from the ashes of the old one, and I realized that everything we'd lost had been worth it. We had lost a house, but we'd found honesty. We had lost financial security, but we'd found purpose. We had lost our illusions about family, but we'd found real love. 18 months later, I stood outside the halfway house where Michael was living, holding a copy of our completed book, When Love Says No, A Family's Journey from Addiction to Accountability. He walked out of the building looking like the son I remembered from 20 years ago, confident but humble, strong but gentle, hopeful but realistic about the challenges ahead. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. Welcome back to the world. We hugged on the sidewalk, and for the first time in 7 years, I felt like our family was truly whole again. Not perfect. Not unchanged by everything we'd been through. But whole. Michael moved into a small apartment and got a job working at the treatment center where I facilitated support groups. We worked together, helping families navigate the same crisis we had survived. It wasn't always easy. Some days, I still missed my old house and the simple life I'd had before everything fell apart. Some days, Michael struggled with temptation and the fear that he might slip back into old patterns. But we faced those challenges together, honestly, with the kind of love that demands growth instead of enabling destruction. 3 years after Michael's release, he met Sarah, a social worker who specialized in helping children of addicts. She knew his whole story before their first date, and she fell in love with the man he had become, not despite his past but because of how he had faced it and grown from it. They were married in my small apartment, with Jessica and David and their 2 children as witnesses, and me as the officiant. I had gotten ordained online specifically so I could perform the ceremony. Do you, Michael, promise to be honest with Sarah, even when the truth is difficult? Do you promise to face your problems together, rather than hiding from them or trying to solve them alone? I do. Do you, Sarah, promise to hold Michael accountable for his choices, while still loving him through his mistakes? Do you promise to be his partner in growth, not his enabler in stagnation? I do. It wasn't a traditional wedding ceremony, but it reflected the hard-won wisdom our family had gained about what real love looks like. Now, as I write this story, I'm 71 years old. Michael and Sarah have 2 children, Marcus, named after his grandfather, and Patricia, named after me. Jessica and David have 3 children and live in a beautiful house with a garden where they grow tomatoes. I live in a small house now, purchased with the proceeds from our book and my work as a counselor. It's not the house Marcus and I built together, but it's filled with pictures of the family we've created from the ashes of the old one. Every Sunday, Michael calls me just like he used to before addiction took over his life. But now our conversations are different. They're built on honesty instead of performance, on mutual respect instead of manipulation. Mom, he said in last week's call, I need to ask you something. What is it? Do you ever regret the choice you made in that motel room? Do you ever wish you had just let me run and keep my problems to myself? I thought about the question carefully, just like I'd taught him to do. Michael, that choice cost me everything I thought I wanted. But it gave me everything I actually needed. It gave me a son I could be proud of, a purpose that gets me up every morning, and a family built on truth instead of lies. Even if it meant losing the house Dad built? Your father didn't build that house, sweetheart. He built a family. And families aren't made of wood and nails and mortgage payments. They're made of people who love each other enough to tell the truth, even when it hurts. I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. All of you, the man you were, the man you became, and the man you're still becoming. As I finish writing this story, I want to leave you with the most important thing I learned from our family's crisis. Love isn't about protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Love is about loving people enough to let them face those consequences, even when it breaks your heart to watch. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to say no. No, I won't enable your destruction. No, I won't pretend your lies are truth. No, I won't sacrifice my integrity to preserve your comfort. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. But sometimes, it's the only thing that can save them. And sometimes, it's the only thing that can save you. If you're facing a similar situation with someone you love, if you're watching them destroy themselves and wondering if you should keep rescuing them or force them to face reality, I want you to know that you're not alone. There are support groups and counselors and people like me who have walked this path and survived it. The choice isn't easy. But the choice is yours. Choose love. Real love. The kind of love that demands growth and accountability and truth. Choose love, even when it costs you everything. Especially when it costs you everything. Because sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. And what really matters is each other, honest, accountable, growing, and whole. That's the end of my story. But it's also the beginning of a new one, built on the foundation of truth and real love. If you've made it this far in my story, I hope you'll take a moment to think about the relationships in your own life. Are there people you're enabling instead of loving? Are there truths you need to tell, even if they're difficult? Leave a comment below and let me know. Have you ever had to make a choice between protecting someone and holding them accountable? How did it turn out? And if this story helped you in any way, please subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that real love isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about families like mine who are struggling to find their way back to each other. And remember, it's never too late to choose truth. It's never too late to choose real love. And it's never too late to start over, no matter how old you are or how much you think you've lost. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest losses. Sometimes the people we think are destroying our lives are actually giving us the chance to discover who we really are. My daughter-in-law broke into my house, shouted at me, and tried to steal my deed. What I discovered in that moment, about my son, about my family, and about myself, changed everything. It left me speechless then. But now I have so much to say, so much wisdom to share, so many people to help. And that's a gift I never could have imagined when this nightmare began. Thank you for being part of my journey. Thank you for listening with your heart. Until next time, remember, choose love. Real love. Even when it costs everything. Because sometimes, everything is exactly the price we need to pay to find what we've been looking for all along. The end, that's what needs to happen. Prison, Mom. 20 years minimum. Is that what you want for your son? I looked at Michael, really looked at him. This hollow-eyed stranger who was willing to steal from his mother and fake his death and destroy his wife's life to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. I want my son back. The real Michael. The one who called me every Sunday and helped his father fix the roof and cried when our dog died. That's the son I want. That son is gone, Mom. He died the first time I placed a bet I couldn't afford to lose. No, he didn't. He's just buried under all these lies and schemes and fears. But he's still in there somewhere. Michael's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went white. They're here. Who's here? The people I owe money to. They followed you. Jessica jumped up from her chair. That's impossible. We were careful. Were you? Did you check to make sure you weren't followed from Patricia's house? We had been so focused on our family drama that we hadn't thought about outside threats. Through the window, I could see 2 black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. What do we do? Jessica asked, panic in her voice. We run, Michael said, already grabbing clothes and shoving them into a duffel bag. No, I said. What do you mean, no? I mean we don't run. We face this. Together. Mom, you don't understand what these people are capable of. I understand that running hasn't solved anything. It's only made things worse. Look at where we are, Michael. Look at what we've become. There was a knock on the door. Not Jessica's coded knock, a hard, authoritative pounding that made all 3 of us freeze. Michael Washington, we know you're in there. Open the door. Michael looked at Jessica, then at me, his eyes wild with fear. Michael, I said quietly, I need you to trust me. One more time. Trust your mother. Mom, no. Don't answer the door. But I was already walking toward it. I'm going to talk to them. They'll kill you. Maybe. Or maybe they're businessmen who want to get paid and will be reasonable if we approach this honestly. Before Michael or Jessica could stop me, I unlocked the door and opened it. 2 men in expensive suits stood outside our room. They looked exactly like what you'd expect loan sharks to look like, large, well-dressed, and completely intimidating. Ma'am, the taller one said politely, we're looking for Michael Washington. We believe he's in this room. He is, I said. I'm his mother, Patricia. Would you like to come in and discuss this like adults? The two men looked at each other, clearly not expecting this response. Ma'am, your son owes our employer a significant amount of money. We're here to collect. I understand. Please, come in. Let's talk about how we can resolve this situation. Michael hissed from behind me, Mom, what are you doing? But the two men followed me into the room, removing their sunglasses and looking around at our pathetic setup. I'm going to be completely honest with you gentlemen, I said, gesturing for them to sit down. My son has made some terrible mistakes. He's hurt a lot of people, including his family. But we're here today because we want to make things right. The shorter man spoke for the first time. Making things right means paying what he owes. $250,000, plus interest. How much interest are we talking about? Another $100,000. $350,000 total. Even with my house, we were still short by more than $200,000. What if we could give you $120,000 today, and work out a payment plan for the rest? Michael grabbed my arm. Mom, stop. You don't understand what you're doing. I shook him off. I understand perfectly. I'm trying to save my son's life and what's left of our family. The taller man leaned forward. Mrs. Washington, with all due respect, payment plans don't work in our line of business. When someone owes our employer money, they pay all of it, or they face the consequences. What consequences? Let's just say your son would disappear permanently this time. The threat was clear, but I had reached a point where fear couldn't control my decisions anymore. I see. And if Michael runs, if he disappears again, what happens then? We find him. We always find them eventually. And when we do, the debt has usually grown, and our employer has become less understanding. I looked at Michael, huddled on the bed like a frightened child, then at Jessica, tears streaming down her face, then back at these two men who held our family's fate in their hands. What if I told you that Michael was willing to turn himself into the police for the embezzlement? What if he was willing to cooperate with federal prosecutors to recover the money he stole from his company? Mom, no. The federal charges could result in asset forfeiture, I continued. The government would seize everything Michael owns, including any money he stole. That money could be used to pay his debts. The two men looked at each other again, clearly having a silent conversation. You're talking about your son going to prison, the shorter one said. Yes, I am. For a very long time. Yes. And you think that's a better solution than him paying what he owes and starting over somewhere new? I thought about the question carefully. Was prison better than a life on the run? Was facing consequences better than endless running and lying in fear? I think my son needs to stop running from what he's done. I think he needs to face the truth about his choices and start making amends for the people he's hurt. Even if that means going to prison. Michael was staring at me like I'd gone insane. You want me to go to prison? I want you to stop being a coward. I want you to start being the man your father raised you to be. And if I refuse? Then you'll keep running until these gentlemen find you, and you'll die as the same coward you've been living as for the past 3 years. The room was completely quiet except for the sound of traffic on the highway outside. Everyone was staring at me, Michael, Jessica, and the two men who could either kill us or let us live. Finally, the taller man spoke. Mrs. Washington, your son's debt isn't going away just because he goes to prison. Our employer doesn't care about justice or redemption or any of that. He cares about money. I understand. But if Michael cooperates with the federal investigation, if he helps them recover all the money he stole, that could be several $100,000. Enough to pay most of what he owes. Most isn't all. No, it's not. But it's a start. And it shows good faith. The shorter man pulled out his phone and walked to the far corner of the room. I could hear him speaking quietly to someone, presumably their employer. While we waited, I sat back down next to Michael. Are you completely out of your mind? He whispered. Maybe.